the project, but basically I've been interviewing various people representing various archetypes of humanity, whether it's scientists or religious leaders or people such as yourself or philosophers, and asking them basically how they see the world and where we're going, how we're evolving.
Right.
So I hope you don't mind. I'm going to be asking you some questions you might not get asked too often publicly. But,
right. For that, yeah, exactly. Great.
Yeah. So how would you describe the current state of the world?
Well, at the moment the world is in quite a disconnected state, certainly us humans anyway, and to the extent that we've become so disconnected from nature is struggling at the hands of what humans are doing. What we're doing and what we're not doing, how we're not being related anymore. So I think really that the humans are suffering from a great separation sickness. And I do believe that humans are suffering from a great separation sickness that has obvious effects on all other beings on the planet at the moment.
So do you think that we are an innately conflicted species?
This phenomenon of disconnection and separation certainly seems to be a modern ailment. And if we look back 12,000 years ago or further, we find that the ways that our species and our ancestors, our human ancestors, were related to their natural environments were very different. Humans didn't have this superiority complex. They didn't deem to know better or to be above the other species, and truly regarded all other aspects of nature as fellow beings of equal value. I don't think we're inherently conflicted, but I do trust that in some way our journey of separation and going fully into duality is one way in which we are being set up to learn, to integrate, to come back into unity consciousness. So it's part of some mysterious opportunity for us to heal the polarity within ourselves and in our ways of interacting with the rest of the world.
It just seems to be a shame that we seem to be taking a lot of species with us through our journey of self-realization.
Yeah, absolutely. That's precisely my lament, is that on our way to our selfish learning, we're dragging a whole lot down with us. And I have to say, what amazes me in my work with interspecies communication, again and again, particularly when I'm working with wildlife or with environments that have received unpleasant effects at the hands of man, what amazes me is how compassionate all non-humans are for us. The animals that could have long time ago risen up and trampled us all to death and just expressed their dismay and their despair at what we're doing, they don't do that. They have such compassion for the extent to which we've lost our ways, and they just stand in ongoing presence and witnessing what we're doing, and a certain kind of patience as a spiritual quality.
I was going to ask you about that, because there was another fellow that we met that was in Damanhur. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. And he brought this machine back that you can hook up to plants, and they can kind of relate to whatever's going. You can sort of get a sense of how they're relating to whatever's happening. Yeah. Whether you're singing and they'll kind of sing along or make some kind of presence felt. But what he was saying was that the plant kingdom, there is quite a bit of, he senses anger, a bit of resentment towards humanity, a bit of something. I'm not sure what the right word would be, because I'm not sure how different species feel, whatever that is. But he says that there's a bit of animosity towards humanity. But you're saying that in your relationship with mammals, I suppose, mostly, that there's not that.
Yeah, in my communications with mammals, mostly there's not this animosity towards us. That said, the species that are closest to us genetically tend to stand up and just show us who we're being and not going to take our treatment of them lying down. I'm thinking specifically of the baboons and the other of the ape and primate species that I work with. And when they are treated badly at the human-wildlife sort of conflict zones or interfaces, they tend to stand up and give us back what we're giving them as the very strong mirrors that they are to us. Perhaps because they're more closely related to us, there's that opportunity and that similarity and that mirroring. And in my communications with plants and with more wild species who might be lucky enough not to have anything to do with humans ever in their physical lifetimes, they certainly are aware globally and environmentally of the impacts that we are having. And there certainly is a kind of despair. There's a kind of a sense of loss, not only for what they have lost, but for a sense of great sadness at what we have lost too. So they have to some degree given up on us, if I can put it that way. But I wouldn't say that I've experienced anything as overt as anger, and certainly not from the collective consciousness of one species towards the human species. If anything, the metaphor or the mental image might just be one of a certain species, heaving a sigh of dismay and turning their back on us and silently walking off into the sunset that we've prematurely created for them.
How do you experience that communication? Can you describe that?
Experiencing telepathic communication from another species is very interesting, particularly the further away from human that species is. All that's really happening on the quantum level is that their emissions, their vibrations of their state of being, or emotions or thoughts, if they have brains like we're used to and have that kind of cognition, all these emissions, their states of health, are just radiating quietly on a quantum level in unseen ways to us humans. And an interspecies communicator is someone who will make themselves quiet enough and centered enough to shut out all the usual kinds of five sensory stuff and really focus on the intuitive incoming information. How I experience the communication myself on a content level has nothing at all to do with how that animal is choosing to send the information. It's a matter of purely receiving the incoming unconscious information or data. And then an internal translation process happens. That incoming intuitive data runs against my mental database of my stored life experiences, smell, tastes, words, mental images. And when one of those things registers in my mind, when the closest match is found, then a word might pop into my head. And it does not mean that the elephant has, said to me, green tree. I might just get the mental image of green tree or the words green tree in my mind as the internal human translation process. But if I have asked that elephant, what is your favorite kind of food, they have sensed the energy of my question and are just showing me their truth in the quantum way that is a universal language between all beings, and in the language that is happening all the time between different species out there too. This is not just about us human animals connecting with non-human. It's happening out there the whole time between the plants and the animals who browse them, between the birds and the other animals that they are alerting to dangers. It's happening out there the whole time, this lovely, rich tapestry of communication, like some wonderful choir singing the whole time.
So how do you hone that awareness?
Excuse me?
How do you hone your awareness? Or was it something that just happened, or was it something you honed?
Honing this kind of communication skill is something that's absolutely accessible to every single person on the planet. I wasn't born with special skills or dropped on my head as a baby or anything bizarre. This is something that is inherently part of the blueprint of the design of our brains, and it is how our ancestors used to relate to the world and how some indigenous people still do. To hone these skills or to fine-tune them simply requires becoming quiet enough from the mental chatter, akin to a certain kind of meditation. However, it's not a certain technique. There's no complicated technique or spiritual advancement level needed or anything at all. It is about accessing a quiet enough inner state to be able to hear and listen very deeply beyond the five senses. And in ordinary everyday life, we do have intuitive moments, but they tend to arise spontaneously in times of extreme intensity or when our life is in danger. Using telepathic communication is about paying attention to intuition when we want to, very intentionally, rather than waiting for it to arise spontaneously. So I use intention to clear myself and to create a connection with the one I want to communicate with. And then I simply have to be quiet and be still and listen, which is deceptively simple. It sounds easier than it is, because the great human condition of busy mind is really the thing to clear out of the way.